Hi, I'm Ella Chopik, and I manage the IT side of our public service desk here at Merit. Merit is an IT and library services and also instructional design unit within the School of Education at UW-Madison.
My name is Chris Gladusky-Wolf. I'm the Public Services Manager here at Merit, and I work with Ella and other colleagues in public services here to coordinate and manage the desk we'll be talking about today.
I started at Merit in December of 2015, and when I first started, you could walk into the library and there were 3 separate service desks in 3 separate locations. There was one at the back of the library, there was one at the side of the library, and I honestly don't even remember where the third one was, but we had 3 locations with 3 sets of staff that were trained by 3 groups, and none of the students could answer the questions that other students could answer. This felt inefficient.
I started in October of 2019, and at that time the desk had been all grouped together, so working alongside each other but still very separate as far as the services provided at each desk. So when I was hired, there was definitely a push to what are ways that we can combine the actual services and potentially even physically move our space. So what Ella and I are going to talk about is the process of that over the last 3 years. And for a little historical perspective, we spoke with co-director of Merit, Anna Lewis.
A quick bit of history. Merit became a merged service organization in 2008, and it's sort of like a 3 became 1 scenario where we had an IT group, a media group, and a library group who felt we had intersecting and integrated services, or could have integrated services, because our jobs, as we saw it, were really to make everybody else's jobs easier. And so that happened, the merger happened in 2008. And in 2012, we had an external group come and review us. And they told us, like, for this kind of merger to take place, for it to really start hitting its mark, the organization is going to need about 10 years. And ironically, when I was getting ready for this, I saw that our really earnest work of creating one service point for all of Merit started going in 2016, 2017. This is the floor plan of the 3rd floor of Merit. And the red areas indicate brick walls that are impossible to move. And they have been somewhat of an impediment to how we physically are able to have service points. All of the yellow sections are places where we have had service points before. And so prior to the pandemic, we had been planning on creating a brand new physical service desk on the other side of the brick wall. So one, it would be more obvious because people again go to the right, but then also that it would provide some more security so that we could see what our users, if they needed our help on the other side of the brick wall, instead of having this big black box basically where we couldn't see. So now we can see oh, is somebody struggling over there on that computer or that printer, so that we can go over and assist and see them. So again, I think the main points were access, visibility, and security.
We also spoke with Connor, one of our students, who's going to share his perspectives throughout this presentation on what it's been like to work here before, during, and after our changes.
I started as an IT help desk only, and so at first it was super separated, and it felt like if a patron came in and had a question I couldn't answer, it was a handoff to someone else on the other side of the desk. So it kind of felt a little bit separated, I wouldn't know how to answer certain questions, and sometimes if we were busy or someone was missing, it was a little hard for me. But a lot of times, I was busy doing IT work, and I would go off and do field work and stuff, so it was a lot of being, out of the desk and that, and kind of very isolated, I think, even though we all sat next to each other.
When I got here in October 2019, like I said, there was a push to combine the service point of library, IT help, and just general reference point, info services. So I started thinking about that then, along with my colleagues here. But what was very interesting is as we all know, we entered a pandemic, which Merit decided to shut our doors. We still provided on-site services once we knew what to do that allowed for that to be done safely, but predominantly we were a remote service for a good year, 18 months. And so the big thing is we had students, as Ella sort of nodded to, that were trained in very specific tasks. And while there was a slow crawl to start to make changes and cross-train prior to the pandemic, what we had to do out of necessity was begin to make those changes during the pandemic. So we shifted students to remote and then had to call upon them to do things like learn how to do remote IT support in a new way that they hadn't done before, to learn how to scan documents when they may have only been trained on shelving books.
It was a little hard at first because, you know, we can only do so much when we're remote, especially when we're not used to it. We did have like a program that we used to like remote into computers and stuff, and that was kind of familiar, but
like taking phone calls on
right.
the computers, right?
Yeah. So now all of a sudden we're doing it exclusively that, and I can't see what's going on with someone's computer, and you know, trying to interact with our patrons, and how do we figure out what kind of questions to ask, you know, and it was a big learning experience, I think. But you know, I had to learn a lot of this on my own, and then trying to figure out a way to present this to maybe some of our staff who haven't been on the tech side of things before and just been in library circulation. So yeah, setting up one-on-ones and setting up like, here's a way we can kind of flow through the steps that maybe would work with it to figure out a way that makes sense to everyone and make sure that everybody's comfortable with it.
So you did a lot of peer-to-peer learning with other student staff.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, and actually I feel like I got a lot of feedback from other people that even helped like kind of learn myself and how to figure out a better way to, you know, convey this information, because really what I would be doing is, you know, I'm teaching this to the students that are on our staff and all these other people at the help desk, and that's exactly what we're going to do in working with instructors and TAs, and that where we're essentially teaching them how to, you know, troubleshoot and solve problems.
One of the big things, which I'm going to just pass to Ella to explain what it was like for her, is how did we incorporate things like, while you all are interested here today, the combination of IT services and library really intentionally, and that happened just sort of naturally.
Yeah, as we prepared to move back on site, which was fall of 21, we realized that the timing was right to take the step towards truly combining our services. We had a lot of our students who had been with us the whole time graduated in May of 21. So we had hired a large chunk of students over the summer of 21 who would start in the fall of 21 and not have the past experiences of having worked in one of those siloed desk positions. So we also took that summer to meet with our colleagues in other areas of Merit to discuss what services they needed the students, the frontline students, to be providing. We had lots of meetings and documenting kind of like what was that front row tier of services that would be the most helpful for our students to know and be able to support the rest of the team.
Yeah, like the feedback aspect, it was so important to us to get a sense of like, what did you see? What worked while we were closed? What worked before? What didn't work, right? Like, how do we, you know, sort of deconstruct these siloed spaces? Because we learned quickly during the pandemic that one of the most valuable takeaways and skills that I think we all developed was communications across all of these areas of Merit. So, you know, being able to take what we learned from that and apply it, like truly apply it by bringing the spaces together.
Additionally, we had the opportunity to make a physical change in our space, which Chris can talk a little bit more on this topic.
Yeah, so because we were in the position to close our doors and do most of our work remotely, before we opened, we decided that we were going to create sort of that vision that leadership and Merit in general had wanted, which was putting the desk that exists today within the space of the library, so closer to the people, closer to the access, and mirroring our ideas with physical example of like one desk, 3 seats that literally sit together.
So then we arrived back on site, fall of 21, with all of our new shiny plans. And like so many new shiny plans, you miss things or aren't prepared for things. Some of the things that we found that first semester were a problem were some of the tech in the library we had never seen or had aged out. We had a plotter that didn't work anymore. We had a laminator that no one had ever used of this new group of students. We had some book scanners that desperately needed updates, just things that we hadn't really thought about because it had been so long, that like 18-month period since we ourselves had like looked at and thought about these things. But we really adopted a like fail fast and get a lot of feedback mindset. So we were prepared to like hear when people were saying things weren't working for them. We knew that we wouldn't be entirely able to do away with specialization because there are some tasks that that we can't train every student on. But we found out fairly quickly that our 2-person at the desk model that we planned to come back to in the fall wasn't quite enough because very frequently one of those 2 students had to step away. And while they were gone, if the other student got called away or if the other student received a question they weren't sure of the answer to, that was a lot more of a problem than it had been in the past when they were like different service points.
Yeah, and it's exactly, so like we had this good idea on paper, the idea of like, we had one IT student paired with more of a generalist public service student, which I think the important point there is we started to refer to the space as our public service desk. So there might be folks that were hired because of skills that they brought, like students that may have interviewed with Ella and I, for some advanced IT skills, but that could still have a baseline and could help anybody. And conversely, on the library side of things, right? But I think the one thing we kept trying to drive home was that everybody has these 10 knowledge points, for example, and the other things were skill building. They were advanced level stuff. And yeah, it was interesting to have looking back at paperwork of how our plans for this of like, oh, well, we did all our processing for this in the back. And then we quickly learned, as Ella just said, we failed fast, was that, well, why? And we brought it out front the next time. Or we had new imaging practices that we were able to,
train on
and tweak.
And the desk, not just does it provide them a bigger picture of what Merit is doing, but it also helps create the community at Merit because they're working those shifts with each other and they're having to learn to ask questions of each other and learn about each other while they're there.
We had the 3 desks together and we were, kind of expected to know all these different things, and it was almost a little bit like overwhelming. So I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to figure it out. But since we're all together, then we got to talk a lot more. We all kind of worked together before, but we kind of had side conversations, never really got to learn each other's role because we were so separated. And now it was, here's Circ and information desk people who are next to me, who is help desk, who is just learning all this other stuff. So it felt like we all interacted in a way that kind of helped each other a bit. So if I don't know something, there's someone else who might. That way I can pick up on that and kind of learn throughout. It kind of created a point where we're taking in our patrons and really knowing what to help them with right away. And if we do need to go back and go do something, we can take care of it. And someone can be there to help other people as well. So it's a little less, there's a little less noise. Yeah. So I think it kind of helped so that we were able to help people and kind of learn things together.
One big decision that we also made, and this came out of during the pandemic, Ella took over the help desk queue, the physical queue, and in conversations with one another during that time, it became really clear, even though this sort of started a little bit before the pandemic, what we really did is how can we intentionally train everybody how to use this tool, and how can we use this tool, the ticketing system, what's it called, request track?
Yeah, request tracker.
To utilize it for IT, of course, which it's already in place to do, library, general information and just be a communication tool. Communication tools became key to our service desk combination between MS Teams, RT, and then various iterations of Google Sites, Docs, etc., drives.
Yeah, I would say that the evolution of our ticketing system has matched the evolution of the service desk. This ticketing system was initially really just used by IT to track problems, but now library uses now library uses RT, our ticketing system, and learning and teaching and learning use RT, and AV uses RT. We all kind of use it to follow the issues along, and it helps to have a common language. And we've deepened what RT can do because it's very customizable. So each department can put in the custom fields that are relevant to them, but we're all learning to speak that same like ticketing language.
Yeah.
So after our first semester back, we took some time to evaluate. I think we put out surveys to the staff and to see how well the services were working for them. And we took some changes that we made. The biggest one was that we recreated a student lead position, which is something we had previously had in the past. But this time we envisioned a student lead as the third person at the desk. So our leads are someone who has worked at Merritt a little bit longer, maybe has a little bit more knowledge, maybe has a little bit more depth of knowledge. And our lead can fill in for that third person. So if one of the two students needs to step away, the lead is still there to help answer questions or to answer the phone or to just be a person if the second student also needs to step away.
Yeah, that lead is really like sort of the liaison to the supervisors of the desk. So they're, in bringing them on, as I was saying, they have the experience, and they also have sort of, our vision is that they have a bigger picture of what's going on. So they have a little bit more of a sense of why. And we want all of our students to have that, but we realize that, and I don't think we've named this yet, but at any given time, the number of students at the desk ranges between 20 and 30. So we're talking about students that may not always get to work together. They might not always meet each other. We might not always see them. Then there's a number of us who do collaboratively supervise the desk. So, that in itself is a task in combining a desk with sort of like multiple areas of knowledge, right? So the lead serves as a really, really good in-between point, and is sort of is a vital role. So it's definitely something that it existed to a certain degree that first semester, but it wasn't well labeled. It wasn't well led from we didn't have all the tools for it because we were learning as we came back. And so I think what we were really able to do was create that sort of solid position and then meet with those students one-on-one to make sure that they felt empowered and confident in their role, which just gave us more and more feedback each semester beyond.
We continuously evaluate our training. We're still evaluating our training right now, trying to match up what the students are actually being asked at the desk so that they can answer in real time the questions that are coming to them, not just the questions that we assumed they would get back in fall of 21, because those questions are always changing. Another thing that we've had to change is, or we're still working on, is the level of tech training that the frontline students get. My initial vision had been that they would be more trained than they are, but in coming back, there was really just so much information that they had to learn that we kind of pulled back on the tech piece, the IT side. So we're still trying to get that balance down of how much IT they should be doing and how best to train on that IT stuff. Basically, they are good at taking tickets, which is really helpful. We kind of at one point we made that the focus for a semester. Like let's work on just getting the right information into the ticket, because that's going to help the people on the back side of the ticketing system get those tasks done. I do see in a future state that everybody has a little bit more IT knowledge than we already do. We have had to hire separate students that do our computer imaging and also off-site IT troubleshooting. Because they it was just too much to ask of the students who are also like answering these questions and answering those questions and pointing to the bathroom, and there was just so many things to do. So I think someday we can get, I feel like every semester we get a little bit more comfortable with the IT stuff, but it has taken a little bit longer than I expected moving back. During the pandemic, we really started using Teams as a way to communicate. Before the pandemic, we didn't really have a method or a location on the internet where we all talked to each other. We would send each other emails or walk in people's offices, whatever it was we did pre-pandemic. But Teams really put all of our communications in one place. And we've used it as a tool to communicate both with our students and our staff, to tag people when things are urgent. But sometimes we get that like alarm fatigue part of it. And it's hard to balance for us, like when do we call in students? When do we tag all the students and say like, you need to pay attention to this? Because if we're doing that constantly, they're probably not paying attention to it.
One of the things I think we've collectively learned about Teams as a communication tool versus something like RT, which has a very like functional use, is Teams is an in-the-moment use, and its function really varies on that. All that to say, one tool isn't the solution, so having something like RT or whatever your team may use, or Teams in conjunction with some other potentially magical tool that we even haven't come up with yet, is really vital to, especially working with a larger group at a combined desk with lots of things going on. But we've tried lots of things. We've tried Padlets, OneNote, you name it, and really what we do is every time we try a thing, we spend that sort of next summer usually to evaluate it and see like how can we make this work, because like Ella said, the best thing we can do is getting feedback about what is actually happening and what is actually working versus what like we think might work on paper based on, you know, our sort of slightly our understanding of it. So I think it's really important if you, for example, are considering a combination of services, to think about it from the ground level. You had a good phrase.
The ground truth.
The ground truth. Because the higher view you have of it, the less close to that you are. And I think maintaining that connection to what is happening, and being okay with revisiting that, and that revisit might be a challenge. It might be something in conflict with what you think is or should be.
One of the things that we did this semester in like our continual refinement was a lot of our full-time staff actually did shifts during the week so that they could kind of get a different perspective. And I feel like every time Anna would work a shift, she would come away with like, oh, well, why are we doing this? What should we be doing this way? Which is all really good because, you know, it's not necessarily things that we see every day, and it's always good to have other people's perspectives and think like, what do we want to do going forward? We're just now facing the next summer 23, and starting to think about what training we're looking for fall. We have a lot of returning students this fall, so we don't have to do as much of our like welcome to merit training. We can take a little bit more time to do in-depth training, maybe start getting those IT skills to the next level, helping the students start with like leadership skills and work on those team building skills. I think those are some of our goals for this next training that we'll be doing in fall of 23.
So takeaways, you know, get a sense of who you need at the desk, right? How many students and what their specialties are and what they're trained in. Be aware of where they are at in their staffing level at a place. So when we had all first years, first semester, it was much more challenging than having what we are walking into this next semester with a lot of returning, and being open to always reworking the training and soliciting feedback.
And paying attention to the changes in your environment. Like, do users now need this more than they did before? Do staff need the student support in this way now versus, you know, a year ago? So just staying abreast of changes within the organization and within the community.
Yeah, that's great.